So in the Perek Gimel of Sefer Melachim, today a special edition of the Shir, because I want to focus on some lessons that are germane to the 9 days. And you'll see what I mean, hopefully, as we journey through the Shir together. Just ask everyone kindly to mute yourself if you haven't already. That's not to mute people from participating, God forbid, but just for ease of use so that we can actually forge ahead without too much background noise. And apologies in advance. Hope there won't be too much background noise here in the shul. And a few of us are here in person. So we're really doing a hybrid model these days. It's very good. We're up to Perek Gimel, happens to be our learning. But even if you have not participated at all with us before, that's of no matter. Almost all of us know the story, at least the general frame of the story, backwards and forwards, of what happens with the two women and the standing in front of Shlomo HaMelech. And to open, let's just consider a little overview of what we're up to in terms of the life and times of Shlomo HaMelech. That's the opening gambit. I don't want to go through all of that, which we have already spoken about from the beginning of the book. But let's say, as far as Chazal are concerned, Shlomo HaMelech is rather young when he becomes the king, possibly even a teenager. The pshat does not indicate that overtly, but there's a way to calculate it based on the age of Shlomo and then how old David is when he dies. There's what to say about it. I won't spend time on it now. Let's say David gives final orders to his son. David HaMelech passes away. Shlomo HaMelech, we talked last time about how he carries out his father's directives, how he gets married in some way, it seems, to the daughter of Paro. We talked about that. We'll have to come back to that. It's coming up again in chapter 11. So we're not going to talk about it now. But there's this idea that Shlomo HaMelech is devoted to Hashem and to the legacy of his father. And therefore he gives offerings, and he has thank you very much, has a prophetic encounter where HaKadosh Baruch Hu comes to him. That's in chapter 3 on page 406, by the way, in the Koren Tanakh, if you want to look inside, 406. If you have your own Tanakh or you want to look online for a Tanakh, Sefaria.org is excellent, Chabad.org is excellent, JPS, I don't know what the, I don't remember the web address for it, but JPS, Jewish Publication Society, is English translation, Mechom Mamre is good, Al HaTorah, all good, alatara.org website. So he has this encounter with Hashem, verses 5 through 15, and it's a dreamscape in which Hashem essentially asks him, what do you want? And what can I grant you? And recognizing the idea that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is offering him whatever his heart desires. He asks for a Lev Shomea, Lishpor Amcha, Lahavin Bein Tov L'Ra. That's verse 9. He asks, please give to give your servant, this is after the preamble of thanking Hashem and showing a Kara Tov, etc., to have a heart that understands, that can hear and therefore understand, to judge, adjudicate, which we understand to mean not just in judgment in a juridical sense, but also to lead your nation, to be able to discern and to understand between good and evil. Who can judge or adjudicate or lead your nation? They're very heavy. It's a ponderous nation. And Hashem agrees. And Hashem tells him, you didn't ask for wealth, you didn't ask for longevity, you asked for that. So you know what? I'm going to give you all of them. And that's essentially what transpires. Verse 15, he wakes up. And he comes to Yerushalayim and he stands before the Aron Brit Hashem and he offers offerings. We'll come back to that theme. That's a strand we're following through. When is he in Giv'on? At the top of the page here, verse 3 and 4. He's in a place called Giv'on, North Yerushalayim. Then verse 15, he's standing before the Aron Brit Hashem in Yerushalayim. So he's doing that, and he makes some kind of, a feast. Then comes the story of the two women who stand before Shlomo. We're going to focus on that today. I'm skipping the story. Leapfrog over the story, get to chapter 4. And it tells us in chapter 4, verses 2, verse 1 is really part of the story of chapter 3, as we'll see later on today. But verse 2, if you just scan your eye through all of chapter 4, the list of names, we'll come back to that more in depth. Next we study Sefer Melachim Alef, which will be in a while from now, grant you. But we'll focus on why are these names here? Why do they matter? What do they represent? And chapter 5, we learn about the rulership and the vast rulership of Shlomo HaMelech. And verses on page 408 now in the Koren Tanakh, it's Melachim Alef, Perek Hey. We learn about the bread of Shlomo. We learn about the meat of Shlomo. We have a very, very graphic description of all of the types of foods and the Jewish people generally enjoying prosperity, how many horses he has, how much chachma he has, how different nations want to be involved with him, how he writes 3,000 aphorisms, aphorisms, sayings, allegories, right? He puts this together. It's verse 12. I'm on page 408 now, chapter 5, verse 12, just scatter shot to show you some of this. And then we're going to get from there into the story of the building of the Beit HaMikdash. Now, why did I skip over? I leapfrog the story. We refer to Shlomo as being incredibly wise. We refer to him as being an individual who has great intellectual sweep and depth and an ability to analyze, to understand, to feel, and we have one story about it. One story. So when we read this story, we need to realize it's not just a story, it is the story. And what I mean by this is that the stories people will tell each other about great leaders will often shape, I think today they would call it the narrative about who they are and what they represent. This story was told by every bubby to her grandchild when the grandchild went to sleep. My bubby told me this story. And Zadie's and parents telling their children, you know how great King Shlomo is? This is the story that gets told. And we should realize its placement, that it is somehow going to cement Shlomo as the king. I'll start the story by the end of the story at chapter 4, verse 1. Right, I see Karen wrote about George Washington, the cherry tree. Right, American presidents. There's lore. Right, how about Lincoln? You know, think about great American presidents. I don't want to go past that because then you're going to get partisan, and we're going to have people screaming and shouting. But right, there's lore about great world leaders. Do you know what they did? You know the story. This is the formative story about Shlomo as the king. You look at chapter 4, verse 1. Page 407 of the Koren Tanakh, it's the end of the story about the two women. Again, I say it every time, ignore the numbers. It's not really chapter 4, it's the end of the story with the women. How do I know? Because the Masoretic text that we have in front of us, the Koren Tanakh, where it gives you the split here of the Perek, it tells you, Vayihi HaMelech Shlomo Melech al Kol Yisrael. That's not news. I knew that already, that he was the king over all of Israel. You know I knew that? Because it said he became the king. That there's being the king, there's being the king. There's being the king because that's your father died and you're the next one in line. And there's being the king because this establishes you. And this story establishes him. Where's the judiciary in this story? Is there no Sanhedrin Agadol? Our faith claim, in fact, is that there is a Sanhedrin Agadol, yet there's people coming to stand in front of the king directly. Now, you could counter and say, wait, Avshalom, remember, gives us a hint that David was doing this too, because remember Avshalom's claim, interposing himself. For those who remember the story, he stands on the steps, if you will, outside of the palace and tells people, don't go in there to talk to my father. My dad doesn't know anything. I'll give you the judgment you want. Like those billboards, for personal injury attorneys or something. You see, I was driving in the mountains recently in Pennsylvania and New York. So, right? You call us. You get the verdict you want, right? So Avshalom was not the lawyer. He was claiming to be the judge. So, you want what you want? I'll help you. I'm here for you. Right now, let's look inside at some of the sources to understand, just to set the stage. Just the first line here on the source sheet that I'm giving you here. It's just maybe a throwaway line, but it already connects us somehow to the 9 days. It's interesting. The halacha tells us that Imchal Tisha B'Av Be'echad B'Shabbat. If Tisha B'Av falls on Sunday, that's this year. O shechal b'Shabbat v'nidche la'achar Shabbat. This is how it was last year, previous years. So ochel basar v'shoteh yain b'suda mafseket. You can eat meat and drink wine even at the last meal because it's still Shabbat. Umala al shulchano, and you can put upon your table afilu kisudat shlomo be'eit malchuto. You can have everything on your table. This is not the word yad; it's the letters yud dalet from the Magen Avram. So ignore that. Because we're not learning Magen Avram today. You can put on your table even the Suda of Shlomo at the time when he was the king. How much is that? Now you know, you can look in. Wow, there's a ton going on in his table, right? What I want to argue, though, is that part of what's going on to Shlomo HaMelech's table is not just the foods, but at the table of Shlomo, the table that Shlomo sets is one in which he has established himself in a primary role, if you will, right? And to think about what that means. Another indication that this is a story that keeps coming again and again to us, that was being told and retold, is look here at the Radak, the second source. Az tavona, that's the first two words, and then came. It's really in the future tense, then will come in the future, right? Kimo ba'u. It's as if the Radak says, it said they already came. Imilat az yavo, berov atid b'makom avar. Oftentimes when it says az yavo, in the future will arrive, it really refers to something in the past. Just like az yashir Moshe or az yashir Yisrael. We have two examples in the Torah. In the future, they will sing. We learn halachas from this, or at least hashkafa from this. But at the same time, az yavdil Moshe, az yidaber Yoshua, az yivneh Shlomo. Perush, what does all this mean? It says az, then they will do it. It says in the future tense. It's syntactical, says the Radak. Upirish az kashav migivon. Then when he came back from Givon, where he had that dream, and he came back ubal Yerushalayim, and he came to Shalom, stand in front of the Aron Kodesh. Ba lo zeh adin liadov v'nirata bo hamatana atova shenatan lo HaKadosh Baruch Hu chachma uvina. What's the az? Then, following on what happened right before, that he came from this other place, namely from Givon, where he had the dream, down to Yerushalayim, standing in front of the Aron Kodesh and giving these offerings on the Mizbech in Yerushalayim, shifting the worship center to Yerushalayim Ir HaKodesh itself. So there you have it. Okay, now, I'm going to argue that it also means, just like Az Yashir Moshe B'nai Yisrael, it's like something that was sung repeatedly, not just one time in Jewish history. How do I know? We say it every day. Az Yashir Yisrael, it's the song of the Jewish people. Az Tavona, little asterisk, this is not just a happenstance, happens to be the story. It's the foundational story. It's the formative story. Now let's go back and we'll learn a little bit Pshat and Tanakh. We'll raise some questions perhaps together, see some different elements of the story. Again, on page 406, about two-thirds of the way down the page. It's chapter 3 of Melachim Alef, verse 16. Before we start, I'm calling a timeout. I got to close the doors because there's so much sawing behind me. I can't hear myself. So give me a second. Hold on. I'm going to close the door. Too much going on. Saws are taking over. Okay.
Can I just make one silly?
Go ahead. Sorry about that.
It says again about Chalom. All this came to Shlomo in a Chalom.
Yes.
Now, in your other class, we talked about Chazon.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So in our biological thing, we have fight and flight. So when you are in flight, you are concentrated in your mind in a very narrow accomplishment goal. And to extend what the Rambam said, we have within us, it's not the word dream alone. It's widening the psychological things. So you have flight. Then there's
Okay, there's more nuance, in other words.
Nuance. It does not have to be.
What is it? So what are you thinking about this specifically? About Shlomo having to.
Hashem is speaking to Shlomo.
Shlomo, yeah.
Chalom.
Yeah, Shlomo's,
So
he comes to him in a dream. He comes to him in a dream, Nachon.
So I would rather have that position like we're in a mindset of flight. Nothing else matters. Our concentration narrows.
Just to focus on this. Okay.
On that thing.
Okay, and that is what happened. And therefore the story that comes after it is the demonstration of the effect of what it is that happened in that dream. It's playing out now in the theater of the real. He has that wisdom. So, Az tavona shtayim nashim zonot el hamelach v'tamodna lefanav. Then two women came to stand before the king, and they stood before him. V'tomer ha'isha achat bi adon. I'm sorry, I forgot to translate a word. The two women are not women from high society. The two women are women who have come straight from the house of ill repute to stand before the king. I don't think that was in the story my bubby told me. But it's a crucial detail of the story. The king cares even about the halachas and the diyunim, about the zonot of Yerushalayim. Number one. Number two, he cares. Well, number one, he cares, and he cares that there should be justice even on that level. Al-Hakama cares about everybody else. Maybe that's point two. Point one, there are prostitutes in Yerushalayim at the time when Shlomo Melech is the king. It would seem so. It would seem so. He didn't wag a finger at them at this moment. He told them, okay, let me adjudicate whose baby it is. That's what's in the docket. But it's interesting to consider, yeah, what they're up to, Baruchniut, that there's Shtaim Nashim Zonot, they're standing in front of the king. They got an audience with him. Is this the first case he ever took? Hard to know. Vatomer ha'isha achat bi Adoni ani va'isha zot yoshvot b'vayit echad va'eled ima babayit. So me, the first one said, please, my master, me and this woman over here, we are dwelling in a house together, and I gave birth with her in the house. It actually makes it sound like she was the midwife to the other woman. Sounds that way. When the baby was 3 years old, my baby, this woman also gave birth. And we are together. Ein zar itanu babayit, zulati shtaim anachnu babayit. We're the only two in the house. Let me say it. Some of what I'm going to say today, I'm influenced as ever, not only by the Nachlat Shimon, Rabbi Shimon Krasner, his voluminous writings. I'm only going to take a little snippet from that. Actually, today I have in the source packet a few lines from him, but also from Rosh Yeshivat Har Etzion, Rav Yaakov Meidan, who right here pointed out in his special tongue-in-cheek way that how are there two babies and these are two women and there's no men in the picture? It's what they call sometimes a work accident. That's what these babies are. There's no father. They don't have a traditional family set up. It tells you what their profession is. And that is a layer here because there's a layer perhaps on the face of it of ambivalence about children that come into the world in this way. But they both want the baby, right? Yeah. Okay. So
Wouldn't expect.
But we have to at least allow for that in the story. We assume that the first line here is there's a maternal instinct and they're both fighting because they each want the baby. Yes, but how did the babies come into the world? Most likely. That's why it doesn't mention normally. This story happened circa 940 BCE, 950 BCE, let's say, something like that. It's in that vicinity. A woman by herself is having a baby. Lo yitachen. And that doesn't mention there's a husband, there's a father, there's somebody. You're completely alone. How did that happen? That's how it happened. Okay, so, and she mentions on the third day after I gave birth, this woman gave birth, and we were together. There's no one else in the house. Zulati shtaim anachnu babayit. So I helped her give birth. She helped me give birth. There's no modern equipment. There's a midwife. That's all you got. Okay. Now, Rav Meidan actually mentions that they found somewhere, I think it's in the vicinity of more along the coast, that they found a place with like a burial ground with all sorts of babies in it. And they think that actually it is from something in antiquity where it was a house of ill repute. And unfortunately, babies were born. Zemayesh, either nefalim lo aleinu, miscarriages, but also they, got to stay alive. Can't take care of a dependent. Not really my child. I don't even know who the father is, So it's the backdrop of this, in other words, is a lot more terrifying and sad and tragic, all of those than we would otherwise think. It's not, when I was a little kid, I'm pretty sure I thought there was a hospital and there were two women and this could happen in a hospital and it's a terrifying circumstance. The baby died and someone took the baby and what a terrible mortal fear. But obviously where the husbands were out buying the balloons. So they weren't there when it happened. So they didn't come to adjudicate the case because a woman could go to court. Yeah, it's 950 BCE. It's not It's not common. Remember, we told the story about Avigail with Naval way back when. It was very strange that she should come out by herself at night walking. It was a strange thing. But anyway, Vayamat ben Aisha Zot, the first woman still talking. This woman's baby died. Laila Asher Shachva Alav, she fell on it. She died. She killed it by accident. Vatakum b'toch halayla, she got up in the middle of the night. Vatikachet b'ni me'etzli, she took my child from me. Va'amatcha yeshena, I was sleeping. Vatashkiveu b'cheika, she put the baby in her bosom, she held it tight. Ve'et bina hamet tishkiva b'cheiki, and she put her dead baby into my arms. Now, I don't want to be Perry Mason over here, but did you hear a little contradiction just in the story where something doesn't add up? What did she say specifically about her state of awareness? She said, I was sleeping. I'm asleep, but let me tell you exactly what happened. Well, how do you know if you were asleep? Now, we know the end of the story. This is actually apparently the real mother, but I don't know. Strange. Va'akum baboker, lehiniket b'ni, v'hine meit. I got up in the morning in order to nurse my son. V'hine meit, behold, he was dead. Va'et bonein elav baboker, and I meditated about, I thought about this strenuously in the morning. Baboker v'hine lo hayav v'ni asher yoladati. I looked carefully, in other words, in the morning light, and this is not my child who I just gave birth to. V'tomar isha acheret, the other woman responds, lo ki v'ni hachai u'v'nei chamet. No, my son is the one that's alive, and your son is the one who died. V'zotemer, and the other one, the first one says, Lo ki b'nei chamet uv'nei hachai. Your son is the one is dead, and my son is the one that's alive. Okay? V'tedaberna lifnei hamelach. They spoke before the king. Okay? Vayomer hamelach. The king said, Zot omeret ze b'nei hachai. This one says, my son is alive, uv'nei chamet, and your son is dead. V'zot omeret, and the other one says, Lo ki b'nei chamet uv'nei hachai. That's the order, right? He goes back and he says again what the order is, right? He goes through, he says to them, okay, so you said this and you said this. He's like repeating to them. They should hear, what did you say? What did you say? Let me just repeat it so everyone is on the same page. Let's look at some of the sources inside to see some of this more in depth, and some of the questions that come up. First of all, who are these two women? Az tavona shtayim nashim zonot. Mi hayu. Who were they? Rabbi Meir Omer. Rabbi Meir says, who were these women? Ruchot hayu. They're not alive. They're two spirits. Two neshamas. It's unclear. It's very strange. For Rabbanan Amrei Yevamot hayu. These two women are Yevamot. What's a Yevama? There's a couple that's married. They're not zocha to have children yet. The husband passes away. The husband leaves a brother. And the woman who is now the widow needs to marry the brother. In other words, her brother-in-law. She needs to marry her brother-in-law unless they do chalitza. But Yevamot hayu means they are both women subject to Yibum. Rabbi Simon b'Shem Rabbi Shua Omer Zonot Mamash hayu. They were literally prostitutes. V'hotzi dinan below eidim v'hatra. And Shlomo HaMelech adjudicated their case without witnesses and without giving anyone any warnings. In other words, he didn't. Usually, if something that's usually before an act of commission, that the person has to be warned. Don't do such and such. But obviously, there's a woman here. It seems a woman here whose baby either died or was killed, depending.
How will you translate Yevamot?
Yevamot are two, the Yevamot are people who are subject to Yibum. It's the women who are subject to marrying the brother of their now deceased husband.
Who are childless.
Who are childless, right. Which is, of course, a bit of a question because I thought the story told us specifically they both had a baby. Yeah? Okay, so hold on one second. Please go ahead, Faith.
Someone, and I don't remember who it is, said that there was a mother-in-law and a daughter-in-law. And so if it was the mother-in-law's baby that died, then daughter-in-law was free, she didn't
Ah.
have to wait. But if it was the daughter-in-law.
Right. So there are those who maintain that this was a mother-in-law, daughter-in-law.
What was Faith's question? We can't
Faith,
hear.
Faith said, she just made a comment that she heard that it might be a mother-in-law, daughter-in-law. There was a daya like that. And the question of whether this person is subject to yibum or not, is a question of, is she free to remarry? In other words, if it's a mother-in-law, daughter-in-law, so the woman, they each had a baby. If the daughter-in-law doesn't actually have a baby, so then the daughter-in-law still has to get married within the family. She's not free to go.
The baby that has to wait to grow up.
The baby has to grow up, etc. But they're going to have to wait a period of time. It's labyrinthine. Yeah, to be honest, I ignored that daya because I have too much else to deal with. You're going to see the Radbaz now, what he does with it, which is also quite something. But yeah,
If two
Helen.
Ganovim come to you
Yeah,
and they're
I'll
holding-
repeat it. Yeah.
and they're holding a golden purse and they're arguing about it.
Yeah.
Now, you see two Ganovim coming to you, you don't have to be as a klug to figure out Ephesus is richtig here. You know right away there's going to be chicanery.
Okay, so I'm just repeating what Helen pointed out, which is quite right. If two Ganovim, two thieves, show up in front of you and they have a golden purse, they're arguing over the golden purse. You know already that something's not right here. There's going to be some kind of chicanery because you look who you're dealing with. You're dealing here with this is the lady's profession. So yeah, so there's a question here. There is a real question about what is going on, and you see that even Chazal in the Medrash and Kohelet Rabbah are arguing. So who are these people? What's their relationship, right? So the Radbaz was asked this question. I'm only giving you like a snippet of it. It's a long piece. But he says, you asked me, Sha'alta mimeni yedid nafshi al mishpat shafat shlomo alav shalom, Shlomo HaMelech alav shalom, beit shtei anashim zonot ichtiva yishma amet mishpat asher shafat v'chulei. My beloved of my soul, I know you asked me to answer you about this question. It's a tshuva. So someone asked him a question to respond to him, right? What's the great wisdom here? He used a stratagem to figure out the answer. He did a trick. So take out a knife and you see who's going to scream, who's not going to scream. People today who know how to do it. How is this a sign of such great wisdom? The Gemara says in one place that the bat kol came out and screamed out, "This is the mother." It's Gemara in Makot. I actually didn't put it in the sources, but because it's in other sources. But therefore, everybody had a sense of awe and reverence for him because they saw it from heaven. They accept what Shlomo Melech has said. No, don't say it's because the heavenly voice sort of echoed out, sort of giving a stamp of approval to what Shlomo Melech adjudicated. No, they feared him, revered him, considered him the king because of his intellectual acumen. That was just icing on the cake, but that wasn't what cemented it. The Radbaz says, because the whole point was the Mishpat Shlomo, the judgment of Shlomo, is in fact his wisdom, his sagacity as he approaches these challenging questions. Shuva Yafish Sha'alta, you're asking good questions, he says, and Rabbi Yitzchak Abarbanel already came before you. Umashatiritz Enonachan Be'enai, Tidei Misifro, I don't even want to repeat it, he says. He has his own answer. I think he's wrong. I won't go into it now, but it's another whole idea that we just don't have time to see all of the things inside at one time. What I think, he knew it was the mother from a few different ways. Okay, the mother who's holding the dead baby, the baby that's alive, looks like the woman who's making the claim, and the face of the baby that's dead, so looks like the mother who's holding the live child right now. These are infants. One is 3 days old. One is was just born, or at least whatever age they are. There's a 3-day gap between them. They're still nursing, so they're very small. Okay. Odekira teva isha tovat shiktsata tenua his riza v'zihir of lo shachva albana. Look carefully. When the woman spoke, the first woman, what did she say specifically? She said specifically that I had my child next to me. meaning I was not holding my child. If you look in Pasuk Yud, Pasuk Chaf, sorry. Vatikach b'ni me'etzli, the child was next to me. And the other one, it says that she was holding the child. When she put the dead child in my arms, she put it in my arms, but I don't keep my baby that way. I know you're not supposed to sleep with a baby right next to you. You could roll over on, God forbid. So he realized that the fact that she specifically said the baby was next to me, as opposed to it was in my arms. But when I woke up, the baby was in my arms. I knew something was fishy. And the other woman didn't contradict it and say, no, the baby was not in your arms, because then she would give it away. So she couldn't say that. Od mistama, and by the way, why did the mother who did the switch, why did she put the baby in the mother's arms? Because that's what she was going to do with her baby. Well, not her baby, with her now the living baby. Od mistama sha'al et inyanam va'amru lo shezu shemeret yabem asher haben hachai biyada. Right? Va'amar bevadai ein isha rotz litroch lanik et misha eino bena im lo l'shum tachlit shel hana. That's alluding to that idea. That the idea is that she's shemeret yabem. She's waiting for this baby. Is going to grow up. It's not going to be her child. It's gonna go off because it's gonna have to marry. Not clear if it's the mother-in-law, but somebody else because the yibum situation, and so she's not going to get anything out of it, so to speak. Strange. Ki eina teva maskim al zeh klal. The idea that there's something here about yibum, it's just something's not adding up here, from a natural perspective. Ulficha dan midaito ki isha zu rotza b'yalad hachai af pi she'eina b'na lipater min hachalitza u'min hayibum. This woman wants to actually, this is not what Faith said. I'm sorry. Something else with the baby. This woman was going to have to become a yavama to somebody else because her baby died, and it died in such a way, there's a big discussion, maybe it died in such a way that it wasn't actually born into the world, it wasn't a bar kayama, and therefore she is subject to yibum, and she's going to have to get married to this guy who's her brother-in-law. She doesn't want it. She wants to say she has a baby. She doesn't want to do chalitza. So what is she going to do? She's going to take another baby, make it hers, so that she could say to the brother-in-law, I'm not subject to yibum, I have a baby already. Aval isha acheret im ita demeit bina mala litboa ben chaveret litroach alav haniko lo tachlit v'siba. So if the other woman, if it's true that her own son died, so what's she making a tumult that she wants someone else's baby to be matriach, to be manik someone else's baby? In other words, what's the benefit of taking someone else's baby? Why would you want to do that? That's the Radbaz's view. The woman who took the live baby, she wants to get out of being in a state of yibum, and so she's just making that claim. I don't know. You can take it or leave it, but that's the Radbaz says. Shlomo Melech is figuring out that since she has an ulterior motive, she wants to get out of being in a state of yibum. This is a good way out. Al-Kain Shafat Melech. I'm just giving you a few more. Al-Kain Shafat Melech shezebena marla omdim etzlo zebena shelzu v'zebena shelzu. Therefore, he said to the people standing next to him already, he told them behind closed doors, this is the one, this is really this one's child, this one's child. Uluvara Davan to clarify it, Shiaminu Shekachu, then Asa Tachbula, then he took out the knife. Hazot, Lahavchina Davar. Then he took out the knife to the side. Al Kain Yadu Ki Emet Amar HaMelech B'tchila. The king had already said behind closed doors who's whose child. This wasn't to prove it. It was only now that it was becoming, it was being made evident. Yeah. So that's sort of an idea right there. Therefore, they all heard at a mishpat. Shafat came betchila. He already had made the mishpat happen. Then he made the test to put how far are you willing to go? He knew all of this. They understood that the king had figured all this out before he took out the sword part of it, right? He knew what was going on in their hearts to understand through his intellect and his investigation. It doesn't say it explicitly. It said in a very short manner. I said they stood before him. It's extraneous. They stood in front of him for a while. Then he stuck up and before they even spoke, he knew the case history. He understood something here was amiss, that a woman is claiming that another woman took her baby. And what's going on? This was at the end was sort of also like the makib patish at the last minute, but it wasn't actually to figure out. He already knew this based on the story that had been told to him. The Radbaz goes on and on. There's a lot more here. I gave you just like a little fragment of it, and it's not clear. So let's say this woman took the other woman's baby, but then she says, fine, cut the baby in half. And if they would have cut the baby in half, she still wouldn't have to be going into Yibum. And she'd say, but that was my baby. She got what she wanted. Yeah. Now you're going to say, what about the abject cruelty and where's the human feeling? Yeah, for sure. But these are not people who make long-term commitments, if you know what I mean. I go back again. That's their line of work. So the baby died. Okay. Soon there'll be another baby. I mean, it sounds to our ears very, very callous and cruel and terrible, but it stands to reason that there was some measure of ambivalence going on here. But Zaystach, a woman came to the king and said, but it is my baby and I want the baby. So she did care. So you just see that there's something going on here, some of the maternal instinct. Faith first, and no? Okay, wait. Someone on the call sent me something, but I don't remember what it is now. I think it was Karen. Neither one seems grief-stricken, regardless of whose it is. Wouldn't you expect grief for a dead human? Yeah, agreed. Again, I'm throwing in the element that there's some component here of, let's say, I don't know, ambivalence that's going on with the women. Something. Look with me a few more psukim. You want to say something? Also, sorry.
Shachva alav.
She lay on the baby.
So
She rolled over and smothered
the
it.
grammar makes you think that she's a bit careless
Yeah, she is
about
careless.
taking care of her
It
baby.
seems that way. I mean, but that's the claim. Who took the baby? Whose baby? It's a switch, or is it a switch?
But wouldn't that make her a very suspect kind of person right off the top? That she's not being careful about sleeping and suffocating her baby?
Well, no, the shachva love means that she did smother the baby. There's the two women come to
But there's
present. Does
the
it-
grammar is not passive.
Oh,
The grammar is active.
not sure. Okay, in terms of the grammar question, not sure the answer. I'm not sure.
You know, it's like.
I'm not
doesn't
sure.
seem
I'm
like
not
it.
sure. I'm not
Shachva
sure.
wasn't an accident.
I'm not sure.
She was careless.
Yeah. Look, I'm not sure. The mother who speaks says on the third day that I gave birth, she's the plaintiff. If she's the plaintiff, presumably because she's the one holding now the dead baby. Obvious. So she's saying, I gave birth, then she gave birth, and then her baby died and she switched it. And look, now I have a dead baby, but it's not my baby. And the other woman says, no, your baby, right? My baby's alive. Your baby's dead, right? So the other woman says, my baby's alive. Your baby's dead. The other one says, no, your baby's dead. My baby's alive. Yeah. That's the back and forth. And then the king repeats again. Then Pasuk Chav Dalet, back in the Nach, before we go farther. Vayomer HaMelech Chuli Charev, page 407, according to Nach. Vayaviu HaCherev Lifnei HaMelech. They bring me a sword. They bring him a sword. Vayomer HaMelech Gizru et hayoled achai lishnayim utnu achatzi leachat verachatzi leachat. Cut the baby in half. The living baby gets cut in half. Give half to this one, half to that one. Vatomer ha'isha asher b'na hachai el HaMelech ki nichmeru rachamea al b'na. The narration tells us it's the mother, the true mother. Her compassion was stirred. It welled up inside of her. Al b'na, regarding her son. Vatomer bi adoni tnu la tayalud hachai. Tnu la the yalud hachai. Give her the living baby. V'ameit al tamitu. Do not have it put to death. V'zoramer, and the other one says, and this is the most baffling of them all, Gamli gamlach lo gizoru, right? It won't be for me, it won't be for you. Cut it in half.
She could have just said no.
Exactly. Why didn't the other one just stand quietly and say, why not? Vindicate it. It's so strange. It's so bizarre. Vayan HaMelech, Vayomer, Tenu la tayalud hachai. V'hameit lo timitu, hi imo. Okay, give this living baby to the true mother, the one who spoke as she did. She's the true mother. Don't put it to death. Vayishmu chol Yisrael hamishpat asher shafat hamelech vayiru mipnei hamelech ki ra'u ki chachmat Elohim bekirbo la'asot mishpat vayi hamelech Shlomo melech al kol Yisrael. All right, so the whole nation heard, and they had a sense of awe and reverence because they saw that the wisdom of God was in his midst, was within him to do justice, to mete out justice. I mean, this is a baffling story. Let's try to unpack a few more layers with the remaining time. So first of all, the Gemara Masechet Rosh Hashanah points out, I gave you the English as well, from a courtesy of Cincino, open source online, Bikesh Kohel Imtzod Divrei Chayfetz. He wanted to find words of delight or words of desire. Bikesh Kohel Liot Kemoshe. He wanted to be like Moshe. So Yatz the Bat Kol, the heavenly voice, came out and said, the echo, divine echo, Amrlo, B'chatuv Yashar Divrei Emet, right? So basically, things that are written in an upright manner, those are the words that are true. And what does that refer to? The fact that Torah says, "V'lo kam navi od b'Yisrael Moshe," there was never going to be a prophet in the Jewish people as there is as Moshe Rabbeinu. V'chad amar, says one said, no, it's b'Neviim lo kam, b'Melachim kam. Yeah. So what one explained that refers to the idea of there's no more Navi like Moshe, but a king. There was someone better than Moshe as a king, and that was Kohelet, it was Shlomo himself. Elamani Mekayim Bikesh Kohelet Imtzod Divrei Chayfetz. What does that mean? Bikesh Kohelet Ladun Dinin Shibalev Shelo Be'edim V'Shelo B'Hatra. He desired to be an individual who would adjudicate cases using his own judgment, not with due process, not with witnesses, not with warnings, right? That's what happened in this case. There's a custody battle. That's what he decided. So Yatz the Bat Kol ve'amrlo v'chatuv yashar divrei emet. Right? That which is written in the Torah, i.e., the upright words, that's really the truth, which is al pi shnayim edim yakum davar. Right? So I'm going to ask you, this is product placement. I'm pausing for a moment to please come back and learn with us. Next, we learn, because we will come back to the theme of Shlomo's wisdom as a hazard and a liability for him. His intellect will get the better of him. And here is the seeds of it in a very positive way. I don't need due process. I don't need to use the system. I got the smarts. Hashem gave me an unbelievable gift. Some people are prodigy to play music. I'm a prodigy to be able to know people and adjudicate cases. And I don't need any kind of procedural systems. I'll just do it with my own heart. And already the Gemara here signals, the Bat Kol says, no. Al pi shnayim edim yakum davar, al pi shlosha edim. You need 2 witnesses, 3 witnesses. You need due process. Now, it's not to undermine, because here's the question. But in this case, he didn't do that. So did he do the wrong thing here, actually? We know that David adjudicated cases. Remember when someone came to David HaMelech and told him a story about a man who was poor and he had a lamb, right? So this happened all the time. And the aforementioned story about Avshalom. So the Nachlat Shimon, Rabbi Shimon Krasner, Shlita, in his voluminous work, engaged this and has pages and pages of essays on this question, because the Rishonim were interested in this question. Under what circumstances could a person who was serving as a Chacham, as the Rav of the town or something, just adjudicate cases without a due process, even in the Middle Ages or now? Like, when can you just go and, like, the rabbi's going to paskin? This rabbi doesn't paskin. We have a bezdin, right? But in terms of, those kinds of issues, not for me to do, but how did Shlomo do this? And we're supposed to learn anything from it. So the Rush, which I didn't give you here because it's a very, 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 very long piece, very, very long, and it's so labyrinthine, but he brings up the idea that sometimes there could be a case where a person would adjudicate a case that's what's called an umdana demuchach. It's a set of circumstances that proves what the circumstance really is. And what he tries to figure out, the Rosh and others, is the reality of the Gemara itself telling us stories where the court is not allowed to rely on umdana demuchach. They still have to use due process, and sometimes the justice system will be stuck and unable to prosecute, say, a murder case or something, because everybody knows what really happened, but if we don't have the due process, we're not going to go ahead with executing someone in some such thing. Now, they weren't doing capital cases here in the case of the Rush, He lives in the in the 14th century, end of the 12th, end of the 13th, beginning of the 4th century. But he is the great mind and luminary of world Jewry, and he deals with this. So the Menachos Shimon writes, "Menachos Divrei Harosh." You could use the circumstantial evidence, basically. There's no other way to figure it out. Can't even do it with one witness. There's no due process. There's no choice. Yeah, but if you look in the Gemara, which we just learned a moment ago, so I'm not going to read it again, right? Look at line 1, 2, 3, 4 to the end of the line if you're looking in person. Otherwise, you can see the arrow that I gave you here. Behind the Bikesh Ladun, he requested to adjudicate Alpi Umdana. That's what he tried to do. This is written further along in my works. I wrote his name of the Yaakov. It's extrajudicial. It's against the law. The Yatzda bat called the Be'inan Eidim Davka, because there was a bat call that even told him you need Eidim. Now there were no Eidim. It was the two women. There's no one else there. That's part of the case. We could explain this Gemara as that what he really wanted to do is do away with the court system altogether, at least for his lifetime. He could do it on his own. That's not allowed. Right? But when can you make these adjudications happen without due process? The beginning of the story is the woman said to him there was no one else there. So there's no choice. When the Gemara says that this bat kol came out, it's not about that case specifically. The Adarabba, on the contrary, Sham, Hiskim Kodesh Baruch Lipsak Shelo, Hashem did agree. I in Masachet Makot, where it says Shlosh Makom to fear Ruach HaKodesh, or Beitin Osher Shlomo, tells you 3 times the Ruach HaKodesh came to a Beitin, one of them was in Shlomo, and it gives you this pasuk. Vayana Melech, Vayomer, Tnulad, and Ayel Rechai, Vamet, Lo Timituhu, Hi Imo. Menayada. How do you know? Dilma iaruma miarma. How do we know that it wasn't really, they weren't so conniving, so deep, such deep thinkers as you said, the two Ganavim are arguing, the two Zonot, maybe they'd stop at nothing to lie. So Yatz the Bat Kova Amra Hi Imo, B'chule. Okay. So V'dochak Lomar, according to Nachlat Shimon at least, he thinks it's a stretch to say the Bat Kol was agreeing with what Shlomo himself had already decided on his own. Rakal Etzam Achlatato, and not only that, it wasn't also giving him plaudits. Excuse me, let me say it more clearly. It's forced to say that the bat kol said, yes, Shlomo, you're right in the decision you made, but you're wrong for having tried the case in this way. No, it must be that it was giving him also the Yasher Koach, if you will. Shem was saying, and you did right over here. Why? Because there was no other choice. Right? Maybe what Shlomo was asking when he said that he wanted to adjudicate cases without due process, what he meant was, I know the thoughts of other people, or I always have Ruach HaKodesh to adjudicate these things. In the comments, I'm going to talk about it further along, and that's not the case of an umdana, and there's where you have the Tshuvat HaRosh, what the Rosh wrote about this, his own circumstances. It's a very long case. Which goes on and on, as I said, for pages and pages. So I didn't give you the whole thing. We're running a little short on time, so let me shift a little bit into high gear. Let's see the Malbim. The Malbim asks a number of questions. He asks, why did it say twice there's no one else in the house except for the two of us? Why did it say at the beginning that it was next to me and that it was in my bosom? The Malbim here is basically going to be quoting the Radbaz. And why didn't it say that it was lying next to me instead of next to me? Right? Why did it say I got up in the morning and I checked in the morning? Why did this woman say that she recognized that the dead one was not her son, and she didn't say she recognized that the living one was her son? Why did one of them say, using the language, my son is alive, your son is dead, and the other one said the opposite, your son is dead, my son is alive? Why did the king repeat what they said a second time? What is the chachma, the great chachma in this mishpat? We understand it's so obvious that a mother will have pity on her own child. What would have happened if the other one had been very smart and understood what was going on? And she would have also said, oh, you know what? I also think that the baby should stay alive. Give it to the other one. So So now he goes into it. What is v'anachnu we're together? Don't think we're not in separate rooms. We're literally together. There's no one else there. It's just the two of us. There's no one in the building. So it's not like there are different rooms. It's not like we were in separate rooms. It's the two of us. It's a one-room house, whatever it is. There's no one else there. But she took my baby from being next to me. Everyone agree that's how the baby died. And she's saying, but I always kept my baby next to me. Again, why did the mother whose baby actually died because she rolled over onto it, put her dead baby into the other baby woman's arms? Because that's what she would have done. There's a mirroring going on. So it's a slip. That's what she's claiming. So I got up in the morning and I was meditating on it, thinking about it in the morning, meaning immediately in the morning I realized it's not my child. Lest they say, Bal Tomar Shanishtanah Machmat Mita, Kirata Techev, Osifa Vinelo Haya B'nia Shayaladati. In case you'll say that the face of the baby changed, Lo Elena, because it was no longer alive, that its face was contorted in some way, I looked immediately and I noticed that this is not the baby that I gave birth to for several reasons. Alef, Sheikira She'ena B'na, she recognized not her child. Bet Ashayalati that I gave birth to. And it says the Malbim, Ki B'na Nolad Gimel Yamim Kodem. Her son, she explained, had been born 3 days earlier. The Akira Shazah mate who nolad ata, Shekvar Yukar Nolad ata, min ben Gimel Yamim. Claims the Malbim, I don't know, mothers, you can tell me, that the baby after 3 days will look a little bit different than a baby exactly the moment it comes out of the womb. So one was an absolute newborn and the other one's 3 days old already. They looked a little bit different. And therefore I could tell just by the way that the baby looked already, because it was an absolute newborn. It was an infant of 1 day old and my baby was 3 days old. I'm sure it's the strongest argument, but that's the Malbim's reading that's what it means, that I noticed that it's my child and the one that I gave birth to specifically. It's mainly that she says, I recognize that the dead baby is not mine. All right, the main claim is, she says that the dead baby is not hers. She didn't say that she recognized that the living baby is hers. Why? Maybe their faces looked similar. The fact that the child that died was different from her child that died, by process of elimination. Again, I'm not sure. I'm so tzahitzt about this myself, but the Malbim, again, he's struggling. What did Shlomo Melech see? Who would have changed the baby if not the other woman? No one else is even in the house at that time. It's possible you want to claim that a thief came in from outside and changed the baby. That's the shift. No one outside even knew that they had the babies. The two of us gave birth in the house. No one knew about it. That was the point. There was no one there because no one even knew about it. We had these babies quietly. Again, take it or leave it a little bit. But I just wanted you to see the Malbim struggling also to figure out, so what is it in the words that Shlomo understood and how she explained it? So the other woman says, Lo ki b'nei achai u'bnei chamed, v'zot omeret, Lo ki b'nei chamed u'bnei achai. See, Perak Atuv, Kibud Dabram, the scripture tells us that when they spoke, Amar hanidbat b'loshem b'nei achai u'bnei chamed, v'tovat amra b'hefech, b'nei chamed u'bnei achai. They started from which child was alive or dead, depending. Uklal b'lashon. The general idea is, the gist of it is, so says the Malbim, the person will say first what is the main thing, and the secondary piece will come after. All right. So and the one who starts with the one who starts off by saying my child is alive, the main thing she's thinking about is that my child is alive. That's the main thing she wants to communicate. But the one who goes first and says your child is dead, the main thing is that the dead baby is that belongs to the other person. Lo shia chai b'na. But she doesn't want that the living one should be hers. It's very strange. What does he mean here? Doesn't want or doesn't think that hers is alive? He could figure it out that he could hear who the real mother is. The Malbim goes on. But it could be that actually each one put first what would their main claim and what their main claim was to prove their case based on what they knew best. Process of elimination. As I explained before, the one who's being taken to court. By the way, which one is doing the taking to court? The one who's holding a dead baby right now. Because the one who's holding a live baby says, well, it's my baby because I'm holding it. Right? So the claimant, so therefore the claim of the woman who is aggrieved, whose baby is really alive, is not that's my baby, but I know this is not my baby. The one who's being sued, her main proof is, look, I'm holding it. Right? And therefore, the proof came that way. Amnan, b'chol zot, hevin Shlomo b'chachmato, she'omer mekademet b'nei chamet, umitzat shezeh ikar megamata, ki hagam shepapam harishon, shebirra, rayotea, hayt tzrich lahaktim, sheben chaveretu hamet, shezeh ikar haraya. B'chol zot achas shechaz zot pam shniya, second time, beis pa'amim. K'mos shekav t'barna lifnei melech, but came dabru kam pa'amim, they kept said it repeatedly. Uv'chol pam, every time. Ikdima hatovad b'nei chamed b'nei achai. Mizeh hiskil sheikar megamta hu rak shegam la gam l'chaverta lo yiyeh. Now here the Malbim does something which is very strange, I must tell you, and I don't understand what he's doing. He basically wants to argue, because when it says Aisha Acheret, if you look at the bottom of the page 22, it sounds, verse 22 rather, it sounds like that's the other woman replying to the claim. You see? The plaintiff spoke, the defendant replied. The plaintiff spoke again. So the plaintiff spoke, told her case. I'm holding a dead baby, it's not really mine. The other woman responded, no, my son is alive, your son is dead. And then the first woman said, no, my son is, your son is dead, my son is alive. Somehow the Malbim seems to say that that after the claim was made, the woman sort of finished what she was saying in a way by saying, and as you can see, my son is really alive and your son is really dead. I don't really see it in the pshat. I think the Malbim kind of, to me, it seems like he forced us not understanding what he's saying.
Rabbi?
He writes here, let me finish the sentence. In the beginning, she brought the proof. And then afterward, when it was repeating it, Yagdim kol echad mashu ikabir tzanol vilvo, mashirot l'zakot b'mishpat, v'zeh shekatuv, and therefore it says, and that's the next line, that they were speaking. So, in other words, the way the Malbim reads this is that we have the case as presented by the aggrieved woman who's now holding Nabach, the baby that's not alive. And then the two of them repeated their case, but when the two of them repeated their case, the plaintiff sort of summarized by saying, and so you see, Your Honor, my baby is really the one that's alive, and her baby is the one that's dead. And the other woman who was holding the live baby said, no, your baby's dead. And look, because you're holding it, and my baby's alive because I'm holding it. So the fact that the sequencing, the Malbim says, was when they repeated Vatidaberna lifna melech, means they spoke it out, meaning repeatedly. And therefore the king repeated, Zotomer, turning to the plaintiff, Zebni Echai Ubnei Chamed, Vizotomeret Loki Vnei Chamed Ubnei Echai. He said, did I get it straight that you, the woman who's now holding the dead baby, says, this is my live child, and your child is the one that is dead. And now to the other woman, you say your child, Zotomeret Loki Bnei Chamed, the other one accuses, right? accuses the other mother of having made the switch, right? So it's kind of convoluted. Look how the king said in verse 23. This one says, "This is my son who is alive," but the other one says, "No, your son is dead, and my son is alive." So the fact that sequencing was flipped, says the Malbim, is the tell that when they kept repeating it again and again and again, the mother whose baby was really alive put her live baby first, and it was less about accusing the other. Could be. Shelley, you're waiting patiently. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. As you said near the beginning, the one who is a judged to be the true mother says she was asleep. Now, it's pretty hard to see how she could sleep through somebody taking her baby off, even if the baby isn't in her arms.
Yeah.
And if they are not actually even in the same room where somebody's coming in, it just doesn't make sense. You would think that would actually, when Malbim says that a 3-day-old child will look different from a newborn, and it may, depending on whether it's a rough birth and the face gets a little smashed in, 3 days later, it might look a little bit better. That happened with me and my son.
Okay, so that could be. It could be.
Yeah. But I find it very hard to believe that the real mother, after 3 days, is able to sleep through somebody doing this kind of stuff. Now I know that she's the real mother because it's adjudicate. It's a pashah here, but it's hard to buy, and I don't know why the commentators haven't said anything.
Yeah.
It would make it harder for Shlomo to adjudicate, I would think.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know the answer. Yeah. Again, it's a labyrinthine case, right? Like everyone's struggling to figure out, okay, what was the actual logic to figure it out before he brought the sword? Before he brought the sword into the room. So if you look at, I put it back on the screen here, the Radak just points out that they spoke. We learned that this is the minhag of the Baalei Dinin, that everyone repeats what they have to say several times to strengthen what they're going to say, to emphasize. The king says, this one says, and this one says. Chazal learned from this that the judge has to repeat and reframe what they're hearing by they repeating the claims themselves, so that each person can hear what the other said. And now that the judge has internalized it by saying it, sort of echoing it back. Yeah. And they pull out the knife, etc. Right? I put this a little out of sequence, unfortunately, but oh, okay. Well, okay. We don't have time for that Malbim anyway. So the Radak just points out, that as soon as the sword came out, and the first mother, gave in and said, give the baby away. The other one didn't turn to the king, but to the people holding the swords. The woman was pretty sure that the king was not actually going to give the baby to either of them. And therefore, when the woman heard that the other woman said, give the baby to me, she thought the king would still somehow figure out that the baby would go to neither of them. And therefore she said, you know what, forget it, cut the baby, calling the bluff kind of thing. You're really going to do it, go ahead. The Radak basically alleging that the woman whose baby it really was not, really did not have high hopes that she was going to get the baby either way once it was brought into court. The ruse was originally that she was going to say, I'm so sorry you lost your baby. So sorry that's what happened to you, and nothing else is going to happen. But the aggrieved woman took her to court. So, worked out, that's what happened, right? So if you look here, the Malbim, it's a little out of sequence. The Malbim said here, the woman said, whose child was alive, the one who was, she said, my son is the one that's alive. He big me too. She didn't want him to be put to death. Give the baby to my fellow. And not because she had admitted to what her friend was saying, but she preferred that the baby not be killed. She wasn't really necessarily accepting the claim that was being made. The other one was saying, he had tovat, shikdima b'dvareh b'nei chamet, the one who was, making the claim. She said, your son is dead. Amar gam li gam lach lo yeh. But Salomar Achash Kfar Amad Ir or Al Hayalad via Tamid Besafik Mi'imo. Now that we'll never really 100% know, there'll always be a doubt about this child. Ad Shelo Lishnenu Bibirur. We won't know either way whose baby it really ever is. L'chein Gzoru Ubezeh Bira Shemashi Gdima Tamid B'nei Chamet Hu Mitzad Ki Zehaya Ikar Chafatza. And the point that when she kept saying over and over again at the beginning, she opened each time with B'nei Chamet, your son is the one that's dead. What she really meant to say is, that's my main desire. A little bit forced, a little bit hard to understand. Rabbi Chaim Shmuelevitz wanted to understand what is going on in the mind of these people, particularly the woman who did this, who made the switch. Sichot Musar, the essay is called Ha'or v'Achoshech Sheba Adam, the light and the darkness that's in a person. And here we come to a little bit of Musar, if you will, regarding the 9 days. And application for our time, perhaps as well. In that story, we have to understand what exactly is the nature, the powers of the spirit of the person who was willing to steal a child from someone else. Arba chashuvim kemeit, there are four who are, it's as if they're dead. Someone who doesn't have children means someone who doesn't have children, doesn't look after children, doesn't bring anything into the world. So they're missing something. In the nature of a person, they want to do good by someone else. They want to be a giver to someone else. Even though they could do something for others. Lebanav Shalom. When does it come? They're willing to give their all. That's for their own child. The receivers also. In Adam Muchan lekabel hatava gedola mizulato kizu mechayevet oto bakar tov ra elorak beben hutba benafsho koch litor hatava me'ed haorav l'chem mi she'en lo ban ve'en bi'ar leitiv kiroi chashuv kamet. The idea that the receiver also. Person's not doesn't want to receive too much from others because they're going to be obligated to pay it back, but from their parent they're willing to accept it, basically. Okay, so there's something here. There's something here about the relationship parent and child. I'm telegraphing a little bit because we're running out of time. Ulam zu sheratz ligzol ben she'ena shala. The one who wanted to steal a child that did not belong to her. Hari kol yameh teda she'ena ben shala. She's going to live her rest of her life knowing it's not really her child. She's going to have to live with the lie. She has such a desire to do good in her heart. To the point where she's going to steal another child. Her desire to do good for others, her desire to do chesed, is so overarching, she's willing to commit a crime in order to do it. She will seduce herself. She will fool herself to forget that reality. But she'll say, but look how much good I'm doing. The good that I'm doing outweighs the terrible thing that I did. The child himself may never know it's not really his birth mother. He was willing to receive everything from her. That's a substitute for the actual real child that she could have had, which she didn't have. She passed away. But we have to think about this. Didn't she realize the pain, the anguish she was causing the real mother? Meant to steal a child from her. There's nothing that is as wicked, as horrific, and evil as stealing a child from his mother. It's a wonder. That she could have such cruelty in her heart. She has such great cruelty, she's willing to destroy another person's life, but yet she has such a great power of wanting to be benevolent to someone else to raise this child. Says Reb Chaim Shmuelevitz, Elahein hein hadvarim. This is exactly the point. Or the choshech, light and darkness. Misham shim eitzel ha'adam be'erbuvia. The light and the darkness are an admixture within the human spirit. U'shnei ha'kochot yashnam ke'echad b'kerev ha'adam. Both of these powers exist within the same human being. Ve'ein kan kol sirah. This is not a contradiction. V'lachein yichola hi liyot achzarit kol kach ligzol yeled me'imo. She could be so cruel to steal a child from his own mother, kadei she'iyah la imei lehetiv, so that she herself could have, I would say, the narcissistic desire to do good, to do chesed. And it lives within the same person, the or and the choshech. The next section, the same piece. V'yineh Shlomo Amar. This is what Shlomo said. Gizru yelad achad shnayim, utunur achetzi lachat v'achetzi lachat. Cut it, the baby, in half and give them each a half. Because this is not a live child. You know what it is? It's a talis from the beginning of Masachet Bava Metzia. Shnaim ochzim betalis. So cut the baby in two, and everyone will have their object. It's not a subject here; it's an object. Was he so sure that the woman who was the real mother was not going to agree to that too? That for sure she would give up her child. And she has her heart is, she's giving up a license to the baby, a custody altogether. That's it. It's a wonder, not that the mother who's the real mother did this, but that the other mother spoke and she stand quietly. Why did she keep going down the slippery slope? But to come to murder, she didn't go that far until she did. 5 minutes ago, she wants the baby. She stole the baby in the middle of the night because she wants to do good for this baby. Now she's willing to kill it. A person is sitting there falling. Once you're falling, you'll fall all the way. She was willing to do kidnapping. Murder wasn't far behind. It was a very emotional scene, and she had already done something terrible, and the ends justified the means, how she got this baby. So now he helped her go all the way down, and that was the slip. If she was of right mind, she might have stopped and said, okay, yeah, because it's my baby. But she was so wrapped up with the idea that she had done this terrible thing, and she said, but it was the right thing to do. And now you caught me, you're going to expose me. She didn't want to be shamed as not the birth mother, so kill the baby. The light and the darkness in the same place. In closing, I'm taking 1 more minute of your time over here, which really means 3 minutes, but hopefully it's worth your while. And if you have to go, I fully understand. Rav Kook wrote about many different things in his writings. I got this reference actually from Rav Meidan and his shir about it. So I went to go look it up, where Rav Meidan shows this piece from Rav Kook. So I went to go find it, and it's from the Shemona Kvatzim. Rav Kook used the story of the two mothers and the baby as an allegory about the Jewish nation. There was a machloket. The machloket is a little bit still going. How to lead the Jewish people in a not yet Medinat Yisrael. Rav Kook died in 1935. But there are already different ideas. What should we do at a time when there's so many people who are they've breached the borders and the boundaries of Judaism? They don't follow Torah and mitzvahs, and they're carrying the flag of Hefkerut with a strenuous hand. They hold up the flag. So maybe we should split the nation up, because the ksherim, the people who are holding the flag of Hashem, of the name of Hashem. They shouldn't have anything to do with the Porkei Ha'ol, who are sinners, the transgressors. Should we do that? Or maybe the power of peace. So maybe the power of the desire for peace should override everything else. Right? So he writes, the fact that we're even talking about this, it shows how low everybody is. that we haven't yet purified ourselves as a nation. And what he basically says is the following. We can learn all of this. These groups, the two groups, he means the two religious groups. He says these are fighting words. I like the two women who came to stand in front of Shlomo. And what is it? They came then to a point where the sword came from the wisdom of Hashem through Shlomo. And the question was, what do we do with this baby? And one group was willing to say, even if I can't have the baby, even if the baby will not truly, I know really in my heart of hearts, it's my baby, but I'm willing to let the baby live, even if it's going to have to live in a different kind of a way for now. I'll go see it. I'll have some relationship to it. The true mother says, at least let's not kill the baby. But the other mother actually, after a point, says, I don't care if you take a knife to the baby. Just you don't get the baby. And for that, Ruach HaKodesh screams out, that's the real mother, is the one who cares that the baby should not be killed. Now, this was a very, very harsh thing that Rav Kook said, and he didn't say too many harsh things. But, the Nimshal in the story is the different groups of Jewish people, some of whom were really so opposed and justifiably opposed that they were just saying, we don't really care if this baby gets cut in pieces, but better than that, then the baby should continue to be, under the thumb of that which we don't accept. And Rav Kook said that's lozu haderech. Now it's not the Parshat HaMikra directly what's going on. You understand? But Rav Kook was writing this at a very pivotal moment where there were a lot of people who really felt that we should have nothing to do with people who are over Aveira. Most of the Yishuv was not Dati. Most of the Yishuv was Chilonim. And oftentimes there were people who had given up. They grew up with it. They ran away from it. They rebelled. So he writes further along here, Yesod Sidkat Tzadikim Chol Dor V'Dor Nitmechet Hi B'Rishat HaRishayim Shebe'emet Einam Rishayim Klal Kol Zman Shem Dvukim B'Chefetz Libon Chlalut HaUmah Ve'amech Kulam Tzadikim. That really there are tzaddikim in every generation that supports even the wicked people. Why? Because they see that they're not really wicked. That while they're still connected to their heart's desire, which their heart's desire is that there should be a nation and the nation should stay together. V'amech kulam tzadikim v'chitzoniut v'chitzoniut harishut shelahem mo'il ametz kocham shel tzadikim kidur daya lechamra. The fact that they are externally wicked gives in a certain way that tzaddikim great strength, like the sediment that has to stay in the wine or to preserve the wine. It's the preservative of the wine. Now, he's not claiming that therefore what they're doing is lechatchila or b'diavad. It's neither. It's egregious that they've given up on religion. It's terrible. It's terrible to anti-religious. But we don't want there to be a cutting up of the baby. We want there to be people who stay together and to be together as a nation. Of Meidan says that his interpretation here is that there was also a criticism of the religious Zionists in this story as well. You know why? Because the mother, even though she loves the baby, wants to give it up, she's also a Zionah. She's also in a very lowly religious state. Now, Rav Meidan says he doesn't think any of the other Talmidim of Rav Kook agree with him. He's known to be avant-garde in a lot of things that he says, and it's like, what? But the idea that everyone in this story is in a lowly state, but that we shouldn't end up with Khalila saying, so let's have parts. Let's cut the baby in parts, as long as I get my portion. If you put it back into the Navi, the family fight, which came, abated, and is coming back, isn't it a little bit the story about whether there's a possibility that we're going to cut the nation into pieces again? It's in the story. And right after the story, the last pasuk, Vayhi Melech Shlomo Melech Al Kol Yisrael, is the king over all of Israel. The baby was not cut into pieces. The baby stayed alive. I'm not suggesting the story didn't happen. For sure it happened. If it says Shteit Yishrib and it happened, But do you understand how this could be a foundational story, not just about the wisdom of Shlomo, but about Shlomo saying to the people, Dir balak, be very careful, like they say in Israel today. Don't decide that your desire, that you're not getting everything, means that you'd rather just cut it in pieces. Because if that happens, the living baby dies. Yeah. So I think of that now as we're going into Tisha B'Av and during the 9 days. At the moment, we find ourselves in as a Jewish nation in the world with all of our external problems. Look at our internal problems. Look at the internal problems in the Medinat Yisrael that I'll speak for everyone on this call. We love so dearly, but it's so riven with conflict, so much strife. And I'm reminded of the words of Mori Varabi. Zecher Tzadik Livrach was asked by Rav Sabato after the disengagement in 2005, where 10,000 Jews were removed from Gaza. Right, wrong, whatever it is, you can figure out for yourself what history says 16 years later, but whether that was a wise move, not a wise move, whatever. But Rav Sabato said some people are saying, quoting from Chana, but backwards, Lo al hayelad hazel hitpalalnu. Not for this child did we daven. So Rav Lichtenstein said to Rav Sabato, I asked those people, so would you prefer that there not be a baby? Would you prefer there not be a child? And I read that story from the story with Chanal, Yelad Hazelit Palalti. Here's the baby, where the baby's been reduced to being an object. You think it's an object, you're going to fight about it? Here's the sword. Would you like us to cut it in pieces? You'll get your pound of flesh, but at what cost? Murder. And of course, no child for anyone. And one group is willing to say, fine, je m'en fiche, I don't care, do it. The other one says, maybe it's not going to be the way I'd like. Maybe it's not going in the right direction. But still, we're not going to come to the point where we're cutting it on principles, on high-minded principles, etc., which will end up Vayihi Hamelach Shlomo Melech al Kol Yisrael. And this year, and years like it, we have no Sudat Mafseket. We sit on the Shabbat that is Me'ein Olam Haba, and we hark back, before we go to our Tisha B'Av, we hark back to the time when the table of Shlomo was aplenty, but also when the table of Shlomo represented all 12 tribes, not as separate tribes and striations and pieces, but one nation, I should say, one nation united under God. And under Malchut Shlomo, the Melech appointed, a Melech Shah Shalom Shalom, who represented a Kadosh Baruch Hu, Vayeshev al Kisei Hashem. Wish everyone a great rest of the day. And Mirz Hashem, we will not have Tisha B'Av. It's still possible. But in case we have to have it, at least on the Shabbos going into it, we'll think a little bit about these themes, and not just to take solace in them, but Davka to feel ourselves challenged and redouble our efforts to create more Avat Yisrael, even with all of the problems and issues that are in the world at the moment.
Shouldn't this
All the
possibly-
best. Have a good day.